left, I did just want to read you a couple of questions from my patrons. PRIMO NUTMEG patrons who support the show on Patreon can submit questions to guests. So I just had a couple here. One said, I've heard lots of people here in the States compare the motivation of Brexit supporters with that of Trump build the wall supporters. But it seems to me that while there seems to be an element of truth to that take, there's also a lot of common ground, particularly from the left, with opponents of trade deals like TPP and TTIP. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, it's a good question, and both of those are true up to a point. The question of Britain, small island, being subject to literally, well, not literally, because I suppose the limit would be the membership or the population of the EU. But we could have, in theory, had 400 million people come from the EU and come and live, work in Britain without a buy your leave, without a passport shown, without a visa required, without a work permit required. Now, of course, we didn't get 350 or 400 million people, but we did get many millions of people. And those millions were people who were coming from low-wage economies to our, relative to theirs, high-wage economy. So a worker in Bulgaria, for example, has a national minimum wage of £1 per hour, whereas if he earned £7 in Britain at the minimum wage, he was fantastically increasing his own personal standard of life. But for the working class that were already here, wherever they came from, whatever color they are, this represented a downward pressure on wages. You don't have to be Galbraith to work that out. This simple economics, an increase in the supply of labor in the absence of a strong trade union movement or a government prepared to legislate to stop it, can only lead to a depression in wages. And that, of course, is what it did lead to. Many millions of mainly single men coming into the country, of course, puts an upward pressure on rents because these workers are coming in for a short, medium, or long time, but they don't have homes or families here, so they are renting in the private rented sector. And thus, again, you don't have to be an economist to work it out. A very large number of people chasing a scarce number of housing units drives the price of those housing units in the rented sector up. Thirdly, a significant number of people, millions of people, coming into the country in the absence of public services can only lead to increased pressure on already decimated public services. So you've got 4.5, 5 million new people, but your school, your doctor's appointment possibilities have not improved, your hospital is not being replaced, rebuilt, expanded, and all the other public services. So there is a bit of the build the wall involved. There's no need to be ashamed of that, by the way. Every country has a border, and if you have a border, well, you have to defend that border, or there's no point in having the border. And if you don't have a border, you're not actually a state. And it's a mistake for left-wing people to be identified with the idea that absolutely anyone can come. There's nothing leftist about that, neither for the workers that are already here, nor the working people in the countries that the poor immigrants have come from. Because, of course, it beheads them. The men leave, the hardest working people leave, the smartest people leave, and they leave their own countries weaker than they were before they left. That is a proper leftist analysis of mass immigration. There's nothing left-wing about mass immigration at all. But the second part of your Patreon question is also true, that TTIP NAFTA, the post-Maastricht Treaty EU, are all things that run out of the same stable. When we finished shipping in cheap East European labour to work in our workplace under the EU's rule, we started shipping our factories out of Britain into Eastern Europe. The cheap labour was coming here and depressing wages. Meanwhile, many of the factories themselves were, in some cases, literally unbolted from the floor and shipped to Eastern Europe to take further advantage of the low standards, low regulation, and above all, perhaps, low wages there. So the reason why Brexit is analogous to Michigan voting for Donald Trump is because the workers in Michigan saw their place being deindustrialized in the name of neoliberal economics. And this cost them not just their jobs, not just their incomes, but their status, their self-esteem. Here we were, blue-collar workers who used to make things, and now, thanks to NAFTA, we are robbed of that ability. This sets moving dynamics inside the family, inside the society as a whole, that are deeply damaging to social and personal and human relations. That happened in Michigan and other places in the US. It happened in the Midlands and the north of England and South Wales, where people voted overwhelmingly for Brexit. So your Patreon questioner is definitely onto something on both those points.